Okay.
Okay,
Now I see
there we
the
go.
recording.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. It is so nice to be here with you today. My name is Mylan Barnes. I am from the Community Engagement Training Team, and I am here with the
Hi.
beautiful Megan today, and
Hi.
I will allow her to introduce herself and where she comes from.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm the legal services coordinator here at Turnaround. I work primarily in Baltimore City, but I do serve some clients in Baltimore County as well as Howard County.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today
Of
to
course.
basically fill us in on this new resource, the Extreme Risk Protective Order. So I
Mhm.
had a few questions that I felt like, again, your expertise would have been just amazing to hear from on this topic.
Yeah.
So my first question, we'll dive right into it. A lot of people still are not familiar with ERPOs or Extreme Risk Protective Orders. In simple terms, could you explain to me like what an ERPO is and when is it used?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, an ERPO is an extreme risk protective order. It's just called ERPO for short. It's a civil order and it prevents an individual from purchasing or possessing firearms and ammunition because they've been found to be a danger to themselves or others. It doesn't have to be themselves and others, it's themselves or others.
Okay, thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I know in most of our outreach brochures, we go over, the resources or even where you can go and file one or the PDF forms. But I would like to ask you some deeper questions of like,
Mhm.
around the lines of what are some of the biggest misconceptions you see people having with extreme risk protective orders today?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So some people, when they think of an ERPO, they automatically think that someone has had to actually committed some sort of dangerous offense, such as a homicide or attempted suicide or anything like that. But they don't have to commit the act. Just the fact of saying, I'm going to do X with a firearm is enough for them to get an ERPO. And also, people think that they don't have to, they have to own firearms. They don't actually have to own firearms, they just have to pose a risk to themselves or others to the point where if they were to get their hands on a firearm, that's when it becomes dangerous. So
Mm.
you'll see some people getting ERPOs for individuals who may have ghost guns, which are guns that have no serial number on them, like people have wiped the serial number off of them, or
Mhm.
individuals who are saying, I'm going to get a firearm and commit this crime.
Wow. Now that's something that I'm even learning today. Like what? Thank you. Because
Yeah.
when you hear it, you automatically have that misconception that like, okay, you have to have a gun. You have to be in this certain situation. Even
Yep.
adding that ghost gun aspect was really important. So thank you
Yeah.
for adding that. I really do appreciate that. My next question is, most people only assume that law enforcement can file. Who is actually allowed to petition for an ERPO in Maryland?
So law enforcement can still file for an ERPO in Maryland. That's where a good majority of the ERPO filings come from is law enforcement. But there's a whole array of people who can file, including someone's spouse or their cohabitant, meaning they live together. They could be a relative and they can be related by blood, marriage, or adoption. They could be someone who has a child or multiple children in common with the individual. They can be a current or former intimate partner. And the reason we say intimate partner and not dating partner is because the aspect of having intercourse is required. The courts do deem that to be an intimate partner, whereas if you're someone who maybe dated for a few months but never really reached a physical level of intimacy, they may not view you as an intimate partner. It can be a current or former legal guardian, so somebody who is maybe under the guardianship of another, and any medical professional who has treated the individual who the ERPO is against. So it can't just be a random like urgent care doctor. It has to be someone's actual doctor, whether it be their primary care physician, a physical therapist, a social worker, anything like that. They just have to have treated them in the past.
Wow. Mind blowing. When I say amazing information coming our way that I feel like everyone in the community can benefit from knowing. Because
Yeah,
sometimes you may only think, okay, well, I can only go this route to gaining this resource, and there's many different options, which is
absolutely.
important for survivors and anyone who is seeking this resource. So I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
And when you just kind of went into the details of who can file and who cannot, or how you can go about that, it made me think of, in a sense, also what barriers do you see that come about when it comes to ERPOs? Like, where do you see, I don't want to say the gaps, but the barriers when it comes to filing?
Yeah, so there's two main barriers that I've identified, and knowing one of them is knowing how to actually file an ERPO. Um, this information isn't as readily available as a protective order or peace order. It's still on the Maryland government website, on their court website. But usually, when you're thinking of protection, most people think of a restraining order, which is basically a protective order in Maryland. ERPOs generally aren't really put out there like that.
Mm.
And the other thing with ERPOs that can be really challenging is that you have to complete multiple forms with a lot of information. So you complete the actual ERPO petition, then you have to complete an addendum that identifies the individual. So that's like identifying their race, hair color,
Mm.
eye color, height, weight, where do they work, things of that nature. And then sometimes depending on your if you're like a medical professional or law enforcement, you may have to do even more paperwork because this is a serious filing. This isn't something where it's like, oh, they cut their hand on a piece of glass. Let's just put a band aid on it. They're good. This can also require a lot of internal filings as well.
Wow. Wow. I'm just like, can I take your brain? Because at this point, this is amazing information, but also just the fact that you're able to, again, give us this insight.
Mhm.
It's empowering, and it's important. And I'm really, really hopeful that these videos reach the communities that it's intended for. Because again,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not common to know how to file, or even how many documents will come behind that, and what type of support you'll need to be able to move forward in that process. And in that, I also want to move forward with the question of, what rights does the respondent have during the ERPO process?
Yeah.
And what should people know about due process? Like, what is something that, maybe from a survivor standpoint, coming in, going through, I have trauma fog, I'm having this experience, you're my legal representative. What's some of the things that I may have not thought of, or I may not know about moving in or starting this process?
Yeah. So one of the big main things is that the respondent has the right to be there at the final hearing. After the ERPO has been filed, they will issue a temporary ERPO. That's good from 7 days, since 7 days starting on the day of the issuance. Now, if they're unable to serve the respondent, they cannot move forward with a hearing. The respondent has to be served because they have the right to put on a defense with or without an attorney. The important part is that this is a civil matter. So they are not automatically entitled to an attorney like criminal defense attorneys. So they would have to hire an attorney, but they still have that right to appear with an attorney or without, which is also known as being a pro se person.
Mm.
So they have the right to be there at their final hearing. Most of the time, they're not there at their temporary hearing because most people aren't telling them, hey, I'm going to go file an ERPO against you. So it's mostly the final hearing where they're allowed to be there. They're allowed to have an attorney. They're allowed to present any evidence that may contradict the ERPO. They also have the right to consent to the ERPO,
Mhm.
meaning they have the right to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not admitting any fault. I'm not admitting that I did anything that's being alleged in the ERPO, but I will abide by the ERPO stipulations.
Oh, now that again is something that I did not know. And I feel like it is, again, important that we have this information in our toolkit, having an understanding of your rights on
Mhm.
both ends, but also having an understanding of how this process will look as a survivor. Maybe walking up and say, okay, I want to go through this process, but I'm scared of how it'll look. But when you have somebody like a Megan on your side, when you have access to resources like
Yep.
turnaround, it sounds smooth. It sounds like
Yep.
a process that maybe I can achieve if I have that support.
Absolutely.
I love that. I truly do. In that, I also wanted to know, look, we're getting a lot out of Megan today, y'all. Thank you, Megan. Thank you.
Of course.
ERPOs require firearm surrender. We just heard you say that, right? What does that process look like? And how is safety maintained for everyone involved when it comes to that removal process and that access?
Yeah, so the respondent has to comply with the ERPO. They have no choice. If they choose not to file, or I'm sorry, if they choose not to comply with the ERPO, they do face contempt charges, which are criminal charges, which can put them in jail. They can also face different penalties, such as having their firearms forcibly removed. But if they are complying, what they have to do is they have to notify the law enforcement unit or barrack or station. So if they're taking it to like BPD, BPE station, whatever, they have to alert them, hey, I have an ERPO. I'm here to drop off my firearms and ammunition. They have to make sure that the firearm is completely unloaded. There can be no bullets, clips, magazines, anything like that in the firearm, and there can be nothing in the chamber. It has to be transported directly to the unit or barrack or station. So they can't say, oh, I'm going to go make a stop at McDonald's and grab a burger. They have to go immediately from, assuming they're home with the firearms, to the barrack or unit or station or whatever, wherever they're going. And they also have to provide a copy of the ERPO that details that they're surrendering their firearms and ammunition in accordance with that. The main safety precaution that is used is the fact that it has to be unloaded, mainly because unfortunately, a lot of police officers, when they are encountering individuals who have firearms, they are putting themselves at risk for being shot, whether it's being shot and killed or shot and maimed. So they really want to make sure that those firearms are unloaded.
Just stepping back to humanize as well, just like how tragic those situations have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And even thinking of how it was before we had ERPOs, just really grateful that, again, we have these supports. This is heavy information. It really is. And, we do this work every day. So it's like, okay, we're dealing with an ERPO, but just knowing how heavy it is, it's like, wow, I just wanted to take a step back to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And we're also about to wrap up soon. So thank you guys if you're watching the whole video during clipping. I appreciate your patience. My next question is, once an ERPO ends, what happens next? Is there a clear process for having their firearms returned? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so there's really no known process in the fact of that information is not found online, primarily because they don't want individuals who may still have an ERPO against them or a protective or peace order against them to try to raid a law enforcement unit, barrack, or station. So they don't put that information online. But generally, it's once the ERPO expires, you likely have to take a copy of the ERPO saying, hey, it expired on January 1st, 2025. It is now January 15th, 2025. I am permitted to have my firearms and ammunition again. And they will likely return them to the individual. There's likely some chain of custody paperwork saying, oh, you came in with 5 shotguns and you're receiving 5 shotguns. So that way they know that they're not keeping them for whatever reason.
Right. Wow. I'm like, whew, I'm sorry.
You're
Firearms
good.
scared me in the first place. I'm like, oh my God.
Girl, I get it.
If you could share one thing the community really needs to know about ERPOs or extreme risk protective orders, what would it be?
My main advice or guidance would be if someone is posing as a threat to themselves or others, whether it be they are threatening suicide, they are threatening homicide, they are threatening anything where a firearm can be used, do not wait to get an ERPO. Do not hesitate. There is nothing the court can do in terms of helping that individual if an ERPO is not filed. And you will not get in trouble for filing an ERPO as long as it's in good faith. So if you file for an ERPO and the court decides, hey, I don't think there's really enough evidence to show that this person's a threat, so we're going to deny it, you do not face criminal charges. You do not face civil charges. It is simply it's a denial. You're free to go.
And I'm sorry to add an extra question.
You're
but
fine. I love
let's
questions.
say, thank you. Let's say I, as the petitioner, I'm declined a ERPO. Are there any other routes I can go for my safety when it comes to protection, or like what else can I do? Do I still have that eligibility to have access to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So even if you file for an ERPO and it's denied, you can file for a protective order or peace order right then and there. You can't file for an ERPO and a protective order or an ERPO and a peace order. It's literally one or the other. So if they're like, hey, we don't think this qualifies for an ERPO, they'll let you know, and you can go back down to the clerk's office or to the commissioner's office, wherever you're filing, and say, hey, I want to file for a protective order. Pretty similar process. It's just more of instead of firearms being surrendered in such a heavy and such a really big manner, they give the individuals a little bit more time to surrender their firearms, and the protections are a little bit different. The protections are more focused on the individual seeking the protective order versus keeping society safe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And that was our last question for this session. I am truly grateful to you and the work that you do here at Turnaround. And thank you for your time and collaboration with the video.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Where the video go? Your girl did not